So with all the side projects I have built over the years, it's starting to become more obvious that a lot of applications could benefit by hooking into AI. And more specifically, if you build something like AI agents that can be trained to give you good output based on various inputs, you can build really cool applications. For example, I have a YouTube title generator right here, which you're seeing all the results in ratings that I have AI agents generate a bunch of titles and then rate them based on different criteria. And then for anything that's below a certain threshold, it rewrites the title and tries to get it up to a level 10. So let me just demo that real quick. I'm going to paste in a URL of a YouTube video, and behind the scenes, this is going to download a transcript, and it's going to generate a bunch of different title suggestions based on my AI agents that I have set up. And by the way, while this is running, let me show you, I am using something called Convex for the entire backend, which makes building AI systems so much easier because you can have all these workflows tie in together and take the output of one AI agent and pass it to the next. So going back to the UI, you can see these titles being generated in real time because Convex has a real-time database hooked into it. So as these asynchronous AI tasks are being completed, they'll go ahead and automatically update in my UI. Okay, so from this YouTube title, we got a couple of good titles over here. For example, 8 SaaS insights that help me survive indie hacking. What real challenges do indie hackers face today? Why 80% of indie hackers fail. Now, I won't lie, these are pretty good titles. At the very least, they are very good inspiration that I can use myself when I need to upload a video. Now, I do want to point out that a simple application like this is actually very complex under the hood. This is the high-level overview of my directed graph. Basically, I get a YouTube video, I download the transcript, I create a summary, and then I have all of these customized agents that write different types of stories. So for example, the storytelling agent might be really good at writing a story of like how I went from junior to senior engineer. That could be a really good title for a video. I have a question format agent, which is probably making something like this. What real challenges do indie hackers face today? And then I have a how-to agents, which is generating some suggestions over here, such as how to market your indie product without a huge audience. So I have all these agents that generate various YouTube titles, and then I have this infinite review process that basically reviews the title based on various criteria, and then it rewrites it and tries to make it better. So that's what you're seeing here in this UI. We start with a bunch of kind of bad titles, and then the AI system continuously reviews them and rewrites them. So building out a flow like this is actually super easy to do when you're using something like Convex, which is the sponsor of this video. I have used Convex before on many side projects. I use it for Project Planner AI. I've used it for the Video Crafter, and I have a bunch of other projects I have used Convex for. It basically makes building out these type of systems that have a bunch of asynchronous jobs running, and you have to scale up and scale down dynamically without having to think about it. Convex is a great backend solution, which I'll teach you how to set up and use when we're building out this YouTube title generator together. This is using TanStack Start for the UI. Now, although Convex is a great backend as a service and has file storage and a reactive database and all these awesome bells and whistles, the thing that we're going to be focusing on this video is using components. So Convex has this idea of components where you can just plug them into your Convex project and get a whole bunch of extra functionality right out of the box. One of the main ones we're going to be using here is the workflow component. This component will enable you to build out really complex workflows like you're seeing here, where we have to basically fan out and run a bunch of different AI agents concurrently, and then fan back in and do something with all the titles, and we can fan back out again for the review and the rewrite process. Using Convex makes this super easy, and the workflow component just makes it even easier. But before I dive into showing you how I built out this application, there is a new Convex agent component that has been released today, which makes writing AI agents even much easier. So one of the really cool things about this agent is that you can define agents that do very specific things and provide them tooling so they can kind of reach out and maybe send out emails or download HTML from a URL and do further processing. Here's a really good example of how this agent works for like a chat bot. You can create a chat agent, and then somewhere else in your code, you can go ahead and continuously chat with that same agent. It's going to keep track of all the memory that it had in that whole discussion thread. And it's also going to vectorize the entire discussion so that when you ask certain questions, it can quickly look up and apply the necessary context to the agent in your results. So if you are using Convex, go check out this new component. It's going to be really, really great. But we're not going to be using this component in this tutorial. We're going to be using the workflow component to achieve everything that I have diagrammed out here. So if you're interested in learning more about AI and AI agents and how to build out systems like this, definitely watch this video, and also definitely check out Convex to just find a better platform for building out these complex web applications. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's make a new repository. And I'm going to go ahead and click new here. And for the repository name, I'm going to say Convex Title Generator. Okay, so if you ever want to refer back to the code that we did in this tutorial, it'll be at this repository. The link will be in the description of the video if you want to check it out. Let's make an MIT license and let's just go ahead and create that repository. Now, once we have the repository created, let's click on the code button and I'm going to grab the SSH copy command, just like this. And then going back to my VS Code editor, let's just go ahead and clone that. So I'm going to clone in that project. Here we go. And then we can just go ahead and open it up. So like I mentioned, we're going to be using Convex for this project, which is a great sync engine, a backend as a service, whatever you want to call it. It has a bunch of built-in features for storing files, for having a database that is reactive in your UI. And luckily, if you go to the documentation and go to Quick Starts, they have a bunch of different ways you can basically scaffold up a project with whatever you want. So I'm going to go to TanStack Start. That's something I've been using a lot on my channel recently. But again, if you want to use like Next.js, they have an option for that. So let's copy this command here. And then we're going to go back to our convex tile generator and we're going to paste this in. And let's just go ahead and click enter here. And then for the project name, we're just going to do dot. So it'll use the current directory that we're in. And then I'm going to go ahead and just say yes, remove the existing README. And then you'll see it generate a bunch of files that we can actually start using to build out our UI and build out our backend. All right, so the next steps is npm run seed. And if this is the first time setting up this project, it's going to ask you, do you want to create a new project or choose an existing one? You may actually have to log in the Convex if this is the first time doing anything with Convex, but it's pretty easy. Just click the login button. It should take you to their site and you'll be good to go. So let's create a new project here. And then we're going to go ahead and just use my web dev Cody team. We're going to call it Convex title generator. And then I will do cloud deployment. They also have a local deployment if you want. It is in beta, but basically if you don't want to have to be dependent on internet, you could have the locally running Convex engine, which is pretty nice. I haven't tried it out, but I need to. So after running that command, they will give you a URL that you can go to view your deployed Convex backend. So I'm going to go ahead and command click that. And notice that over here, I have Convex title generator and I am in the dev environment. Okay, so this is where we're going to have all of our Convex functions. We're going to have our data for Convex. Like I mentioned, Convex is a backend. So it has a built-in database. It has a built-in file storage. It has a built-in way to do cron jobs. It literally has anything you might need to build out a backend API, but you don't have to worry about hosting it. It takes care of all that and the scaling for you out of the box. All right, let's just do an npm run dev, and that should spin up our application locally, and then we should be able to look at it and actually start integrating. And now our Convex application should be running. We can go and open up localhost 3000 and we can see a really simple UI. Now I will say the starting project with TanStack Start and Convex is very minimal, but it is set up properly. So to demo that, let me show you one of the coolest things about Convex. So over here we have some tasks and they're all in a table over here. So the Convex basically is built with using tables, kind of like you would with like SQL, where you have different tables. And inside the table, you have your entries. So I could potentially delete any of these entries. And the cool thing is that your UI is going to be reactive. So if data changes in your database, your UI for every single user that's subscribing to that data will be updated automatically. So for example, let's remove the buy groceries thing. So let's go here. We have buy groceries right there. Let's click it. I'm gonna go ahead and click on delete and then go back to the UI and it's gone. Now to show you the code of how this works, again, this is a TanStack Start project. So the way that you define your routes is there's an app directory and there's a routes directory. And inside the routes directory, you can make different files and folders where you can map the URL path. In this case, we're on the root to different files, and those files can return some React components. It's very similar to Next.js. So if you're using Next.js and you're like, oh, I'm kind of scared about learning something new like TanStack Start, it is so similar that you will not have an issue with it. So opening up the index file, again, we have a route at the /root of our project. It is going to render this component. This component is trying to fetch data using a Convex query from this API endpoint. And the cool thing I want to point out is Convex is completely type safe. So like every API endpoint you add, the data is automatically going to get typed when it gets passed over. So let's command click on Git. We will see here a query, which is what you can use in Convex to grab data from that table that I talked about. So we have a tasks table. This query can be used to grab data from the tables. And the example of how you can do that with the syntax is you just basically do a context.db.query. You pass it your table name. And then you can say collect, and that's going to give us every single entry in that tasks table and return it back. This is just a query, and we'll talk about queries and mutations and actions in Convex as we kind of go through this tutorial, but I want to just give you a quick overview of like how some of the syntax kind of works and also like how convex kind of works. So this will do a query and get all the data, and then that automatically gets sent here, and then we just render it out on the page. And again, what I want to point out is since we are querying for every single task in that table, the moment I go through and I delete or add an entry, it'll show back up in my UI, in my React UI automatically. So like, again, I could add something new here, and I could say like testing and click save, and then now go back to my UI, and that shows up automatically. So we kind of talked about TanStack start and how the routing system works. I also want to mention how convex works. So when you start a convex project, you will have a convex folder. And inside of this folder, any file that you make is basically going to be bundled and deployed to the convex cloud when you create new queries or mutations. So like the moment I change this and click save, like for example, if I just add like a console log and just save this, you will see down here in my terminal, it's rebundling that function and kind of deploying it out to convex, which allows us to basically just like do a refresh on this page if you wanted to. And then we should be able to see some logs pop up over here. Now we see that console log hello pop up in our log section. So, all right, let me just go ahead and delete that, and we will start with actually building something out. Now, don't worry if you don't fully understand like TanStack start and convex. I will be explaining as I go along, and stuff will start to click as I build stuff out. All right, let me just go ahead and commit everything that we have. So I can say like created the initial convex project. So create initial project, and then I'm going to push that up. All right, I went ahead and pushed that code up, and now we should see it show up over here if you guys want to play around with that. All right, what is the first thing that we need to do? Again, we need to add in some type of backend logic that can be passed in a YouTube video URL, and then it needs to download that transcript for us. Let's start with this step right here and try to figure out how we can do that. Let's go to our convex folder, and we can add a new file. I'll call it like transcripts.ts. You can name this whatever you want. Just remember that the name that you use is what you're going to be accessing over here with this API dot whatever. So now we'd have like an API dot transcripts we could access. Now, if we want to invoke some type of backend function that can download a transcript from YouTube, you'd probably want to use something called a convex action. So there's three types of things in convex. There's a query, that's for fetching data from your database. There's a mutation, that's for writing stuff to your database. And then there's an action for any type of asynchronous, non-idempotent code, right? So if it's not deterministic code, you should probably put it in an action. What do you mean by deterministic? If you're contacting a third-party API or you're doing like a math.random, that's when you probably need to have an action for it. So I'll say export const, and I'll say get YouTube transcript. And then we're going to say internal action. Now, I do want to point out there's internal actions, there's internal queries and internal mutations. Those can only ever be invoked by either other queries, mutations, or actions, or they can be invoked manually through this dashboard if you're logged in. Okay, so typically I would start with an internal type of thing, unless you know for a fact it's something you want to invoke from the UI. Like, is it a public facing endpoint that you want to invoke? Usually you probably want to do an internal though. So let's just go ahead and define some args. And the way you can define arguments, let's just give it a URL, and we'll say v.string. Now this v is convex's built-in way to do like parsing. So by default, there's something called convex values that allows us to kind of define what the arguments need to be to call this action. Second thing we're going to do is give it a handler, which eventually will kind of like invoke an API to get the YouTube transcript. But for right now, let's just go ahead and do a console log. I'm going to save this, and then we should be able to invoke it from the console like I talked about. So now that we save, the function will be automatically deployed out to our convex cloud deployment. And then you can see over here we have transcripts.get YouTube transcript. So that's pretty cool. We have that function we declared in our code. Once we saved it, it automatically shows up over here. And I do want to point out there's a lock icon. Again, this is so that you know this is a private internal action and not something that can be invoked from the front end or your UI or whatever. So click on this. We can actually just run it. So let's just go ahead and click run. We can give it whatever URL that we want. We're not really doing like real validation yet. So I'll click run. And then we should see down here at the bottom, it says log of hello. So this was just a demo, like we just invoked an action, and this action is running on Convex Clouds. So we can do whatever type of backend logic that you want to do inside of this action. So what we want to do is when a user passes in a URL, we want to download the transcript. So the way that I'm going to do it, there's a library called YouTube I, which I can install like this. So YouTube i.js. And that's like a wrapper behind API calls to figure out how to download the transcript from the YouTube APIs. And now that we've installed that, what we can do is going to our action over here. We simply just want to import that. So I'll just go ahead and import this. And then we can initialize a intertube object. Let's just go ahead and initialize one here. So now that we have that YouTube object, we can actually say const info is equal to await YouTube dot get info. Okay, and then we're going to pass it the URL. I'm not sure if we need the video ID or the URL. We'll try with the URL and see what happens. It might automatically parse the ending of that URL. And then to get the transcript, we're going to go ahead and just say await info.getTranscript. Okay, and then we can just go ahead and get the result and send that back. So I'm going to go ahead and just return the transcript right now and console log it so we can actually like know what's going on and just test it out. The way I like to code is I like to add a little bit of code and then test it and just see if it's kind of working. Let's grab any of my videos. For example, how to upload files to TanStack. Let's click on this one. And I'm going to grab this video URL without that timestamp at the end and just see if this kind of works. So going back to Convex dashboard, we can go and replace this with the full URL. I will click run action and we will see if this works or not. It looks like it failed. And I think it's because it doesn't expect the full URL. I think it just needs the video ID. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete this actually and just see if it works. So we did get the transcript info, but the endpoint kind of failed. So I'm going to do a little bit of changes here. I do want this to take a URL because I think it'll be easier. But what we're going to do is we're going to get the video ID from that URL and just split the last thing from it. And then we're going to use that video ID here. And then also, I think we just need to parse the transcript data a little bit better. So I'm going to say const transcript text. And I think we can say equals transcript dot, and then we'll say transcript dot. And then I think over here, we want to get the content. It might not be defined. We'll get the body, and then we'll get the initial segments. I know this is a lot of nasty code, but like the API just kind of isn't that good. Let's just go ahead and do this. So again, just had to play around with the data a little bit. I mean, this transcript object was not the full transcript, like it's nested deep inside this initial segments or something. Let's try it again. We should be able to pass in the URL now, and then that should run and download the transcripts. And then if I read it, so for those who are following me along in this TanStack start journey, let's just make sure this sounds correct. In this TanStack start journey, yeah, seems good. Okay, so now we have successfully written an action that we can invoke somewhere in our backend to get the transcript based on a URL. And that's pretty good. So we're going to try to build upon this. This was the first step of that flowchart. The next step is we want to call OpenAI and ask it to summarize the transcript in some type of way. Now to achieve that, let's just go ahead and install another library called OpenAI. I like to use ChatGPT and stuff for mine. You can also install like the Vercel AI SDK if you want to, which kind of abstracts you away from OpenAI and lets you just hit different AI models. But I like just using OpenAI is what I'm used to. But the idea is we can actually make another action here. Again, we're making like a third-party API request, so it needs to live in an action. I'm going to say const action generate summary. Okay, again, this is going to be an internal action. And what this needs to do is take in the full transcript that we got here, and then we need to pass that to OpenAI with a little bit of context, like a prompt, that can summarize it and output something in a format that we'll be able to use. Okay, so the first thing I want to do is I want to make an OpenAI object like this. Let's just make sure we have this imported at the top of our project. We'll say import OpenAI from that. And then once we have that OpenAI object, we can actually just go ahead and invoke it. So I'm going to say await OpenAI.chat completions create, and we can pass it a model of GPT-4o Mini. We can give it a system message that explains what we want to do, and then we can give it the user message of here is my transcript from the YouTube video. And we'll just go ahead and interpolate that out like this. Now for the system prompt, we're going to go ahead and say you are a helpful assistant who needs to summarize the following transcript from a YouTube video. Please provide a few paragraphs that explain the content of the video and also provide a lot of keywords that I could use to improve SEO for my Yeah, I'll just say improved SEO. Please output in markdown format. I like doing that, so it's just easier for me to read as a human. But now we have a way to basically pass in the transcript to OpenAI, get a response back, and then we can actually use the response to either store it or continue down that chain that we kind of talked about in that mermaid graph. And then we can just go ahead and return that content here. So let's try to invoke this again. That should be deployed out now. Let's go back to their convex dashboard. I'm going to grab just like as much as I can from this transcript. Okay. And then we're going to go and click on generate summary. And then we're going to try to run this one. So actually, let's go here. We'll say generate summary. I'm going to pass in that full transcript. And then I'm going to click run. And it's not going to work because I didn't add an OpenAI API key. So I need to actually go and generate one, which I'll walk you through how to do that. And then I need to add it to my convex backend in my settings. All right, so I'm logged in. Let's go and make a new API key. The name of the key, I'll just say the convex YouTube titles. And we'll say default project. Okay, let's create the secret key. And now you can grab that secret key. And then I'm going to go back to my convex dashboard and go to settings over here. And then we're going to go to environment variables. And then we're going to add in a new one. Okay, so I'll say OpenAI API key. Paste that in. I'll delete this key after the video so you guys don't run up my OpenAI bill. But basically, you're attaching this API key to your dev deployment in the convex. You can also add keys using the command line if you want to, but I just like using the dashboard. So now that we've added that key, let's just go ahead and run this again. And that should now send the transcript to OpenAI, which should summarize the data, give us a markdown text, and it should just return it here in the output, hopefully. Okay, so summary of the video, file uploads with TanStack. In this video, the presenter walks through some practical tutorial on how to implement file uploads in a course management application. Okay, blah, 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 a bunch of stuff. And then we have a bunch of keywords that we could potentially use for SEO. So we have TanStack, post methods for file uploads, JavaScript file uploads, stuff like that. All right, so we implemented the logic for this one that downloads the transcript and also this one that makes a summary from the transcript that we can use for these different agents that'll generate the titles. But I do want to bring in something cool that Convex has. They have a whole thing called Convex Components. So going back to the documentation, if you go to Components, they have a bunch of nice little components you can install into your project to give you various things such as like work pools, cron jobs, workflows, which is actually what we want to use to kind of build out that entire workflow I talked about. So we're going to go ahead and click on workflow, and they will explain how we can get this set up. Okay, let's just go ahead and install this. So let's go here, and I will install the workflow component. And then we need to make a convexconfig.ts. So let's do this, convexconfig.ts, and then we're going to grab this code and paste it in. Now to kind of explain what this code's doing, basically components allow you to wrap your convex application and automatically define a bunch of tables and mutations and queries that are all bundled with this workflow component that we're basically bringing in. All right, so when I actually save this file, if we go back to our convex dashboard, we should see a bunch of new things show up in our app now. So if I click here, we should see workflows and then workflow/work pool. If I click on workflow, you'll notice that we have a bunch of tables that are kind of created for us under the hood. So Convex Components is a really cool way where you can actually like extend your database to have more tables and mutations and functions and actions that you can use in your Convex project, or anyone else in the world could basically build their own components and share them, so you can extend the functionality of your application just by installing a little component, right? So that was like, what, 6 lines of code, and now we have all this new stuff defined for us, including our database tables and these functions and actions. Let's keep going through and try to figure out how we can actually set this up. So we are going to create an index file here. So I'll say index, and then we just want to bring in this workflow manager and create one. So we're going to take in the workflow manager that comes from that Convex workflow package. We're going to pass in the workflow component, and now we have this workflow object that we can use throughout our code to basically build various workflows. Now, when I say workflow, this is like a workflow, right? You have something that has to be piped from task to task, the agent back to task. This is a workflow. And having the Convex workflow component makes building stuff like this a lot easier to attach it together and pass data back and forth between your Convex actions and mutations. All right, so going through, let's define a workflow. I'm just going to grab this code, and I'm actually going to make a new file. I think I just call it workflow, hopefully. And I'm going to paste this in. So we're going to import that workflow from that index that we just created. And then we'll just go ahead and import some of the missing stuff here. Okay, so what we can do in this workflow is we can actually start chaining together these various actions that we created. So again, we created in the transcripts, we created one that gets the YouTube transcript. So I can say const transcript is equal to await step dot run action, and we'll say internal dot transcripts dot get YouTube transcript, and then we'll pass it the URL. So we can just go ahead and say that const args URL is equal to something. Okay, and instead of this being hard coded, we probably should have this be passed in. So again, I'm gonna do URL here, and then we'll do args.url. Okay, so this should run the action we just did, which will download the transcript and return it to us. And then once we have the transcript, we can actually say const summary is equal to await step.run action. Same idea, we'll say internal dot transcripts dot generate summary. And then we're going to pass it the transcript. Now we are getting a little bit of TypeScript errors. I think I just need to say string or undefined here. Actually, I think this will be null, and this will be string or undefined. Now I don't really like how this is, I have to do this typing, so I'm going to go back to transcripts, and I'm just going to say if there is no transcript text, I'm actually just going to throw an exception. Let's say no transcript found. Same thing with this. If there is no response content, I'll just throw an exception, so that these will always be defined, and I don't have to do that weird like ors. Okay, so that makes the types a little bit cleaner. And now I can run this workflow. If I rename it, I'm going to call it generate title workflow. And I think the very last step is you need to actually start the workflow. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this code and put it right above here. I'll say kickoff title generate workflow. And that's going to be a public mutation, so we can invoke it from the UI if we want to. And then we're just going to go ahead and invoke this with a hard-coded URL for right now. And we're going to go ahead and just bring some args here. I do want to add like the validator as well, so we can just pass in the URL. And yeah, and we don't really need the workflow ID right now, so I'm just going to get rid of that. Okay, so I know I did a lot. We added the workflows component, and then we created a workflow that's going to attach these two actions together and pipe the output from one into the output of the next. Now you might be looking at this and be like, okay, what's the purpose of this, right? This is just like a normal function we could call in code, right? The cool thing about the workflow is these different steps, you can actually pass additional arguments to have them retry automatically if they fail. And so from my experience of working with, AI API calls is that sometimes they'll fail, sometimes they'll return you some bad data, especially if you have like Zod parsing to make sure that the data matches a certain format. It's not perfect. So I think having built-in retries, which is actually what this can provide us. So if I go to the npm package, they have retry behavior that you can add to your workflow. Okay, so basically if you try to run a step and for some reason it fails, you can have it do a max retries of like 3. You can specify your backoff. You can do like the base multiplier for that backoff. And the default behavior is that they will retry, which is great. You can turn it off by passing some more, options over here, or you can kind of specify a retry option like this. So just to kind of show you, I could actually put another object here, and I can specify how many times I want this particular step to retry if for some reason it cannot download the YouTube transcripts. Okay, so this might be a lot of information if you're like watching this and you're new to Convex, but let's test it out. I think it'll just kind of make sense as we just keep on working on it. So let's go to functions, and I'm going to go back to my main app, and I have this workflow file, and I have this kickoff title generation workflow. Let's go ahead and click on this, and then we can invoke it with our custom URL. So let's go ahead and grab this URL, and then I'll paste it in, and then we should be able to see this thing kick off. And now if I go to my data and go to my workflow dropdown, we won't see any outputs here because this is going to kick off behind the scenes as like an asynchronous workflow, but I can look at the steps here, and we can see that it's doing our different steps. It's doing the first step, which is going to basically grab the URL and download the transcript. And then the second step is getting the transcript and converting it to a summary, which we can see the inputs and the outputs and the run results of all of these individual steps. I can also just click on this checkbox to get a better view of how some of this stuff works. So like I can dive in and see the return value of this step and the input of that step. And it just kind of helps you with debugging. So if you want to kind of visualize this, you can. Very useful. And then finally, at the very end, when the workflow is done, we should get back a final result. So if you look over here, we can see that down here there's a run result. If you click it, this is the summary. So whatever you return from your workflow, if I go over here, this is what's going to be stored in the results of this workflow. So again, it kind of automatically does all this storing of input, storing of outputs, storing of the final output, and then of course the ability to rerun steps. Kind of invaluable if you want to build out these larger scale agent systems. All right, let me just go ahead and commit what we have before we keep on adding too much progress. So I'm going to say adding in workflows. All right, so now for the fun part, we want to have agents that generate titles based on the summary of the YouTube video. So for example, let's start with the storytelling agent. Let's see if we can have this agent generate maybe 10 different titles that can be used in a storytelling format. So again, we have our workflow here, and if we want to run another OpenAI call, we can simply say const, and I'll say titles, which will be like a string of titles, I think. We can just go ahead and pretend like we have an action. We haven't created an action yet, so we're going to go ahead and just paste this in. And this could take in the summary here. And we will just go ahead and say internal. We'll probably make a new file called agents. Let's just make one called agents. And then we're going to say internal agents dot. We call this a storytelling agent. I'll say storytelling agent. Now I might be using the word agent a little bit wrong here. This is basically just a specialized prompt that we're going to use to take the summary and generate an array of titles. So we're going to go back to agents here, and I'll say export const storytelling agent. Again, an internal action. And we will just go ahead and import some stuff that we need. Now I don't want to keep on defining this OpenAI key every single time. So I might actually go to my index here, and we'll just go ahead and say const OpenAI like this. Maybe we can just define this at one place so that we don't have to keep on defining it over and over again. So let's go ahead and invoke OpenAI like this. Go ahead and import that. And again, what we want to do is we want to give it a nice prompt that can really generate a storytelling title for the YouTube summary that's being passed in. Let's go over here. I'm going to say, can you generate a markdown description I can send to AI to help it know how to write a storytelling YouTube title. By storytelling, I mean a title that looks like how I went from beginner to senior engineer. Please provide useful language that can help it generate good titles that are ranked 10 out of 10. So again, we're going to use AI to generate some markdown that we can use for our prompting. So we're going to see how this works. Again, you have to spend a lot of time tuning this stuff. Okay, let's just apply it to agents and accept it. So this is what we get. You are an expert YouTube title creator specializing in a personal journey, narratives, your titles. Use powerful transformation narratives, how I went from X to Y, include specific relatable starting points and impressive endpoints. Okay, so all this information is going to be known by the storytelling agent. And then when you pass it a summary, it should give you back a nice title. Now, the main thing is I want this to generate like 5 or 10 titles, not just one title. So one thing I found that's useful is you can actually use Zod to make sure that the agent outputs something that's useful to you. So we're going to go up here and I'm going to bring in a helper. So we have the Zod response format, and then I'm also going to bring in this Zod import. I think I have to install Zod. So I'm going to go ahead and just say npm install Zod. So the way you can use this, I'll say agent schema, and then I want to go ahead and give this be an array of strings. Okay, I wanted to give back like 10 different titles. So we're going to pass in that agent schema. I think we can do it here, response format. And I believe we can go ahead and just pass it this. Now, I'm not sure if I have to do .beta in front of this or just do this. This might work. Also in the prompt, I think I'm going to go ahead and just say down here, I'm going to say generate 10 compelling titles. Hopefully it gets that idea. Again, sometimes I've seen OpenAI does not give you what you want, so we'll see. We're going to go ahead and just return the content that comes back, which should be an array of strings, I believe. Now, the only change here is that this, instead of content, is going to be parsed, which is not showing up. So maybe I do need to say beta dot right there. And then here I'll say parse. And then this can be parsed as well. And so this should hopefully be an array of titles. Yeah, so we should get back an array of titles. I might rename this to be titles here. Anyway, we'll figure it out. We'll see if this works. So again, going back to our workflow, we should be able to invoke the storytelling agent with the summary, and we should get back a bunch of titles. So if I were to go ahead and just render out those titles, let's see if we get something that is even remotely useful for a YouTube title. Again, just to recap, we've done this part, and now we are doing this part. All these other ones will probably just like turn out real quick if we validated that this implementation's working. Let's go and let's test out this workflow. So let's go back to functions. I should be able to just kick it off, and then we should see if this is going to work. So we should have a new workflow that kind of shows up. Must be this one. It's still running. It can take some time for this thing to finish because it has to do so many OpenAI calls. Okay, it looks like it's done now. And if I were to open this up and go to my titles, we have how I deployed my course platform on VPS in 3 days. From idea to launch, my journey deploying a course platform, how I built my React course platform on VPS and Docker in 5 days. So these are pretty good. I think they're a little lengthy. One thing that I've read is that the best YouTube titles are typically between like 5 to 8 words, 7 being like the best average. I have seen that OpenAI likes to add these little like weird things where it says like my experience : typically, those type of titles aren't the best. But anyway, the point is that we have this returning an array of titles. And now what we could do is add them to like a title pool after we kick off a couple of agents. Let's add in one more agent, and let's make this a little bit fun. I want to add in a Theo agent. Let's see how this works. I'm going to go to Theo's channel, and I want to grab all the titles that are in his on this homepage. So we're going to try to build an agent that's good at making Theo scoped titles. Let's go back to agents over here. So let's think about this. I want to say I'm going to give you a bunch of YouTube titles. I want you to analyze these titles based on character length and other important marketing SEO/emotional characteristics. Let me hide my camera real quick. Then generate markdown I can use for an AI agent prompt to help me write titles that match the titles I paste in. Okay, so we want to basically take all those titles from Theo's channel. Let's just grab these. I think these are all his. I'll paste those in, and we'll just go ahead and click send. Okay, so now it's generating the markdown I can use to make like a Theo agent. And then we're going to go ahead and say Theo agent. And then we can take this markdown, and I want to copy it. I'm going to put it right here. Paste this in. And then again, generate 10 titles that feel authentic while maintaining high engagement and avoid clickbait title. Okay. Okay, so it did a nice analysis on how Theo does his titles. We got some markdown we can use for our prompting. I pasted it in. I told it to generate 10 titles. I'm using the same format as I did for the other agent. And now we can just return those titles as well. All right, so again, let's do a Theo title. So I'm gonna go ahead and just go down here. I'll say Theo titles. And then we wanna call the Theo agent with the summary. So now I'm gonna show something cool with workflows is that you can actually do like a promise all. So I'll say all titles, and that could be an array of arrays of strings equals await promise.all. And then we're going to go ahead and just run all these things inside of promise all. And those are going to get kicked off as asynchronous jobs or steps that all run at around the same time. So let's just go ahead and delete some of this. Delete this, delete this. Okay, let's see if this is going to work. So I'm going to rename this a title pool. This will be like all the titles that we're going to generate. And then we can go ahead and just like return that back. So let's go ahead and kick off again. Yeah, we should probably do flat here. Okay, so going back, let's kick off another workflow. Let's just run this. That should start running. And then eventually this thing will be done with the run results. And we should see a big array of a bunch of different titles. Some of them will be like the journey title. Some of them will be the Theo titles. And I think you guys should get the idea by now of like all the different agents we could just like throw in to this workflow. And eventually we'll get a bunch of titles that we can use. All right, let's click this. And then if we scroll down, I think all the Theo ones will be down here. This VPS deployment will change your node experience. Deploying with Docker Compose, my insane setup explained, my struggle with Postgres security and VPS. Now, I will say some of these titles don't really feel very Theo-like, but you get the point. I think I can also just paste in these titles, and it might just give it a little bit more context. Again, what I've seen with working with AI is that you often have to do a lot of work prompting. Like you have to tweak the prompts, keep on trying new stuff until it finally gets to the point where you get some good information. But we're not going to spend too much time doing that. That could be something later on that we do. Again, the main thing I want to show is that like these workflows, you can easily tie stuff together, and I can just fan out and do all these things at the same time, and then pull them all together and get the results. Okay, so we basically did like 2 of the agents here. I'm not going to do all of the agents on camera. Maybe off camera I can add them in, but we know how to get this title pool of titles generated. So the next step is I want to move on to the review process where I have these different reviewer agents that know how to look at titles and kind of rate them between 1 to 10 so that we can kind of score them and know if they're actually like good titles or not. I'm going to go ahead and just say adding in Theo Agent. So let's start with like a engagement appeal agent. That's like the center one. I'm gonna go ahead and just add a new one called reviewer or reviewers. How about that? And I think we can kind of grab like all the code that we're doing for one of these other agents because I think it's gonna be very similar. So we need like the Zod validator. We need contacting OpenAI. So I'm gonna go ahead and just paste this in here, and I will give this the engagement reviewer. Okay. And so what I want to do is I want to say, you will be given a YouTube title. Please review it based on the following criteria. Now I'm gonna take a screenshot of this and I'm gonna see if I can basically rewrite this section here. We'll do this, we'll paste this in. Can you please update the markdown to describe through an AI how to review this YouTube title from 1 to 10, and also generate the strengths and weaknesses of your review so that someone can improve it if it scores low. Okay, so again, we're going to have it just basically give us some system prompting for us because we're lazy. But the main thing I want to make sure I have here is I'm going to give it a rating, which will be a number, and then we can give it some feedback. And then we'll go ahead and just kind of return that information. And yeah, I think we should be good there. Let's run this and let's see what we get. Okay, let's apply it. Again, I don't know how this is going to work. Let's see, we got feedback, strengths, weaknesses, improvement suggestions. And yeah, hopefully this is good. Now the idea is we want to tack in this engagement reviewer, which is going to take in a title, not a summary. So let's make sure we have title here. Let's make this title, doesn't need to be summary. And we'll paste that in here. Please provide a review in a structured way format, 1 to 10, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I think this should be good. Let's say you will analyze one YouTube title and provide a comprehensive review based on engagement appeal factor. Again, we're going to do one YouTube title, not all of them at the same time, because you know AI, sometimes it does a very bad job if you give it too much stuff to deal with. So I think just focusing on one title at a time will give us better results. But again, you can spend hours trying to tweak the prompting and make sure this stuff be better. Okay, so now what we want to do is we have the titles. We have all the titles. What we want to do is we're going to pass all of them into individual review processes and hopefully run these as concurrent as possible. So we're going to go ahead and just do a const reviews is equal to a promise all. And then for every title that we have, we're going to run a step to do the engagement reviewer. And then we should get back the reviews. And for right now, we're just going to print them out and see. So this should review every title. And I'm noticing that there's no title inside of this. I might as well just like have this return the title too, if that's not going to be too hard to do. So let's try this. I'm going to say title z string and just see if it could also just return the input title. I'm going to call it original title so it doesn't get confused. I don't want to like think and try to like rewrite the title here. This is just a review process. Okay. I think we can kick this off. I don't want it to use too many of my credits, so I might actually have a global configuration somewhere, because right now it's like generate 10 compelling. I might actually do a convex / index and do like a const config equals titles per agent. Right now, I'm going to set it to 1, so we can actually like test this out. Actually, I'm just going to go ahead and just do this. I don't need a config object. Let's go back to the agents, and then I'm going to go ahead and just interpolate titles per agent here. And then we're going to do the same thing down here. Make sure I don't have 10 hard-coded anywhere. Okay. Yeah, all right, moment of truth. We can kind of kick this off and see how it works. So let's make sure everything built properly. And then we're going to go ahead and run this. All right, let's go back to Convex. I'm going to delete all my workflows and also delete all my steps. So it's just easier to like see it with this one particular thing we're trying to kick off. So let's run this. It'll make a workflow. So right now it's doing the transcript download. Now it's doing the summary. And then it should kick off and do a bunch of other things in a second. Okay, so now it's doing, I think this is like the Theo agent and then probably the other agent. Now we have a bunch of titles. I don't know why it generated more than the one I asked it to, but I guess we'll kind of deal with it. And then it should start reviewing them. So we should see more steps kind of pop up. I'm guessing one of these is in a review. So let's look at this. Let's look at the step output. Some feedback here, improvement suggestions, original title, why my Stripe is my go-to for my payment processing on VPS. Strengths, clarity indicates, okay. So it gave it a 7. All right, let's look at some of these outputs. So we have this one, and it looks like it is a 7. Okay, let's look at this one. Click on this. Let's see what this one is. This one's a 7 as well. Okay, looking at all of these, the reviewer's giving everything like a 7. Now again, like where's the issue? Is it the agents writing the titles? Do they just suck at writing titles? Or is the reviewer very biased for a certain amount of titles? And that's, again, where it's going to take a lot of time as a developer to come through and tweak this stuff up. Well, let's just assume we can make these titles better. So we're going to make another agent called the rewriter. So I'll say rewriter.ts. And we're going to grab this whole thing. I'll call it the rewriter agent. And what this is going to take in is it's going to take in basically the same schema that the engagement reviewer outputted. So we're going to go ahead and just like do this. Okay, so it's going to take in all the stuff that the reviewer gave, but the difference is that it needs to give a new title, which I'll just call it title. And that should be good. And so we need to kind of change this markdown. So we're going to use AI again to change the system prompt. So I'm going to go ahead here. I'll say, can you please add markdown description to the system prompt for a rewriting agent who should use the provided rating, feedback, strengths, and weaknesses to rewrite the original title and output a new title that is hopefully a 10 out of 10. Okay, so that's the goal. I know my head's hiding this, but I read it out loud. There you go. If you can pause if you want to actually read that. So we're going to try to see if we can make like a rewriter that will output a new title based on the original and all this feedback. And then we can hopefully just loop over this and input it back into the reviewing agent and kind of do this X amount of times until we get a bunch of different titles in our title pool with different ratings. And then we should be able to get like a full list of all these titles and we can pick from one. So let's go ahead and just apply this real quick. Okay, double check it. You are a professional title rewriting agent. Your task is to approve titles based on feedback and metrics, original title, blah, blah, blah. And we need to make sure that this passes in all that stuff. Okay, cool. So going back to the workflow, we have all these reviews. Now what we want to do is we want to loop through every single one and we want to rewrite it if the score is less than a certain amount. So like we can go ahead and say like const bad titles, and we're going to get everything that's less than a rating of 7. And then we want to rewrite those bad titles. So we're going to loop over all the bad titles. We're going to call the rewriter agent with all of that rating information, which I think I could probably just do. Actually, I'm going to call this bad reviews so that we can actually just pass this in. I think that should be happy. Okay. So again, it's going to rewrite it and give us a bunch of new titles. Now the cool thing is I could potentially do this in some type of loop where it just keeps on looping over and rewriting the bad titles. Okay, so what I want to kind of do is for every single title, I want to be able to rewrite it up to 3 times. Again, I'm not sure how this is going to work. This is the first time I'm actually trying this, but we're going to loop over the bad reviews. So let's just try something here. I'm going to say rewrites equals 0. Const max rewrites is 3. And I want to go ahead and just say while the rewrites is less than the max rewrites. And then I'm going to say rewrites plus plus. Technically, I could do that here. So I'm just going to do it all across the board, just rewrite any bad titles. So I'm going to go ahead and grab this. So we're going to first grab all the bad reviews. And if it's less than, I'm going to say 8. If it's less than 8, we want to go ahead and just rewrite them. And then we want to re-review them. So I'm going to say reviews is equal to, and then we'll just re-review them again. I think here I should say like new reviews. Maybe we'll do that. Again, I'm trying to like just figure this out by hand. So we're going to go ahead and set the new reviews. Actually, yeah, this will be equal to the reviews ... Let's try this. Hopefully this doesn't have some type of infinite loop and bankrupt my OpenAI key, but I think this should be a step in the right direction. Let me kind of read through this and make sure I understand what's going on. So we get all the titles and then we review them all. And then we have a loop that does this 3 times where basically we have all the reviews, we filter down to get the bad ones, and then we rewrite the titles of the bad ones using the review information of the bad reviews. That should give us a bunch of new titles, which we can then re-review them, which means we have to set the new reviews equal to the new set of titles. I think there's something I'm missing. Maybe we just need to like make a set of all titles so we can just keep pushing in these titles. I think what I could do, there might be some duplicates, but I can say reviews is equal to, and I'm just going to spread in I think I can do that. And then eventually we should be able to just print out all the reviews. Okay, so after this process is done, we got to test this out. This might actually be, this might break terribly. And at the very end, we're just going to return the reviews. I did have to go and explicitly put a type here because the type safety was getting kind of confused. So yeah, we should get a giant array of all the titles, their ratings, their feedback, their strengths, their weaknesses, and then we can like display them in a UI when this whole process is done. So I think this is the whole flow. Basically just keep on generating titles and then use bad titles and rewrite those bad titles to hopefully get better titles. And at the very end, we'll have this giant array of potentially good titles. Some of them will be bad, some of them will be good. And then what we could probably do is just like ask AI to give us the top 10 titles or something. For right now, let's just try running this and hopefully it doesn't just blow up in our face, but you never know. Sometimes you get lucky. You write some code and it works first time. Let's go and run this again. We should see this kick off the workflow, which it does, and then it should kick off all these various steps and hopefully at the very end give us a nice set of titles. It looks like it finished. So yeah, now we have like a giant list of all these things. Let me copy them, paste them here. All right, so we have a bunch of 7s. We have a review of an 8. See if we have any 9s. There are no 9s. I might actually change this to less than or equal to. It's like, I don't think the titles that it made were that great. So I think just having it keep on going till we get to at least a 9 would be pretty good. And then secondly, I think we need just more things to test out. Like right now, I think we have it set to 1. Probably not the best. Oh, I could also add max rewrites there. That's a good idea. So we'll do max rewrites. It could actually be a constant we bring in. And then this could be like a rewrite threshold. Min rating, I'll say 9. And then we're going to use just less than. If it's less than 9, then we'll go ahead and just keep rewriting. Now I do want to just make sure my code's right, because sometimes like you think code's right, but it's just not right. So I'm going to go ahead and just ask AI real quick and just say, does this code seem proper in regards to rewriting any bad reviews again if less than a rating of 9? Okay, so AI basically says my code sucks. I think it's saying there's an issue with like the code, the reviews accumulating, and then also the loop doesn't break out if everything is good, which I don't think it's ever going to get all good reviews. Okay, so this one is probably going to add in this if statement, which I'm okay with. That's fine. But let's just apply it and see. Actually, I don't think it changed anything. I think it just renamed it from new reviews to current reviews. I don't know. I'm okay with that. All right, let's try it again. We're going to kick this off one more time, but we're going to use a much larger title. We're going to say like 5 per agent, or maybe even 10 per agent, to really make my OpenAI build go through the roof. But I think after running this, we should get a list of good titles. And also, I think what I want to do is I want to store these titles somewhere. And so we could probably make a mutation. We haven't done a mutation yet. But we could potentially say titles.ts, and we'll say export const store titles, and that's going to be an internal mutation. Again, if you want to write to your database, you'd have to do something like this. Okay, and that'll take in a title, a rating, and I don't think we even need feedback. So let's just go ahead and let's just do await context db insert, and then we want to insert all those titles. But in fact, I want to make each title be one by one. So I'm going to say await promise.all, and then for every title, I want to insert it. And in fact, I don't think we need to do, I think we can get rid of this. Okay, so this just be an array of titles. Okay, so why am I doing this? Because I want to be able to go over to my workflow, and when we're done, I want to run my mutation to store all those titles. So I think I can just do something like this. Okay, maybe I do need a titles here. v.object. Maybe I need to do this. Okay, so this needs to take in an object, I think. So this is something new. We haven't done a mutation yet. But again, all we're doing is like, it's something you can invoke, which is going to take in some data and it's going to store it into our database. Okay. And so as this is running at the very end, we should see a bunch of titles basically populate and get stored. And so let's go ahead and kick off this one more time. I'm going to go ahead and just say run mutation. And then that should kick off a bunch of different workflows because now we have it set to like 10. And if I go to data and go to my own app, we should have a new table when this is done running that pops up called titles. And then we should see a bunch of titles with their IDs pop up. If you look at the logs, it's still doing a bunch of engagement reviewers and then rewriter agents. So it's trying to like get the best titles. And hopefully eventually it doesn't get too many titles, but it should finish and we should see those pop up here. Okay, so now it's done. We have all the titles over here. There was 1.9 I saw. So let's look at that 9. Okay, unlock your potential, launch a profitable online course in just 30 days. So I would say this is actually a pretty good title from, the 1,000 videos I've made and titles I've looked at. That's a pretty clickable title. It's just, it's not related to what my video was about. My video is explaining how I deploy my course platform to a VPS. That is very unrelated to my thing. So I think we got to tweak the logic a little bit of how we're doing this. Like we probably need to pass in more context of like the summary, so that I can actually stay on topic, because right now I think it's just going off the rails a little bit and then rewriting stuff just to sound good, even though it's unrelated to what I built. So again, this is a thing that I keep talking about. Like this takes hours of tweaking and prompt engineering to get this to work right. But I'm gonna go ahead and just drop that down to a 1 so we can potentially make a little bit of progress. And the second thing I want to do is I want to get more feedback as these titles are being created. So I think on the workflow itself, when it's done writing or doing its initial review. So for example, here, I think I could just store all the reviews there. So like, I think the current reviews, we could store all those with their ratings as well. Instead of doing it down here, I might also do it here as well. And do we actually need to return anything? I don't think we need to return anything, honestly. Okay, so we'll test out that little change. Basically, every time we rewrite, I want to just store all the new reviews that we're getting. So we can actually see these kind of pop up as it's doing stuff. Right now, there's like not that much feedback and we have to wait to the very end of the process. Not the best. And then secondly, we want to figure out a way for the rewriter to take in the original summary. So I think we need to take this summary, and this summary should probably be passed in to the engagement reviewer. So I'm going to add a summary here. I'll say original video summary, args.summary, and then we'll just do like a couple of new lines there to put the title. I'm hoping it can use the summary so that the title stays related to the summary. And then I might also say, please make sure the title is related to this summary. I know this is off the screen. Let me scroll up. Okay. Okay, so that will be for the reviewer. But also the rewriter. Where's the rewriter? Rewrite agent, the review. I think we could probably just pass in the original summary here. And then we could also just place in that. And I'll say, again, I'll just say, please make make sure the title is related to the original summary. I think the review is missing something. Where's the review come from? Engagement reviewer. I think this also needs the original summary. Oh, original summary is missing here. Okay, let's try this again. I kind of made it pass in the original summary to all these agents, so hopefully it could be a little bit better. I'm going to delete all the titles that we have, and then I'm going to kick off that workflow again. And then hopefully we should get some better titles that are more aligned with the actual summary of the video. Okay, so the first titles are kind of popping up. Why I chose a VPS. So we got some 8s. How I deployed a course platform on a VPS with Docker in 3 days. It's kind of lengthy. I don't know if I would give this an 8, but as this is churning and rewriting and re-reviewing these titles, they should keep on popping up. Okay, here we go. We got now a whole collection of 8. So it kind of rewrote the bad ones and we got some better ones over here. Okay, more 8s. We got another 7. It might be done at this point. Yeah, I mean, I think this is more accurate. Like even after the rewrites, it's still talking about VPSs in my course platform. So I think it understands from the summary that it's doing better. It's just the titles are so long now. Like look how long these titles are. So like I think the rewriter or something, we have to let it know that it needs to like not be as long. I might just add a section here. Title length. The best titles are usually that 6 to 8 words in length. More emotionally powerful titles can be shorter. Do not make very long titles over 8 words, if possible. So I'm going to give it some more context for like title length for the reviewer. And then also the rewriter, like I might also keep the title under 8 words. Okay. Maybe this will improve it. Maybe it won't. But I think we're just, but I think it's a step in the right direction. So let's go ahead and kick this off again. Okay, so the initial batch, these seem okay. Why I chose Docker for my course platform. That's a pretty good title. I think people would definitely click that. And I would probably give it a solid 8 or 9, honestly. Deploying beginner React challenges on a VPS. I don't think this is good, because like no one even understands what this means. Deploying a course platform on a VPS with Docker, I think this is a pretty good one. Okay, so it's definitely keeping the titles shorter, which I like. I've found that the shorter the titles, like between 7 words, is typically like the most impactful. All right, I think it's doing better with the title length, although it can't seem to get anything over than an 8. So it could just be that like the video I made just doesn't have enough context. But anyway, I think we're making some progress. I'm gonna go ahead and commit what we have, and I'll say adding the reviewer and rewriter. Okay, this is how it goes. I typically do live coding interviews, and no one has the perfect solution to building out a system. You have to arrive to that via trial and error, testing stuff out, tweaking stuff, and eventually you will get this working really well. So at this point, I think we have a really good like back-end scaffolding of this whole agent system. There's a lot of stuff we could add in. I do want to add in a little bit to the front end so we can visualize this stuff being generated in real time. I think that'd be really cool. So I'm going to go to the title, and I'll probably just vibe code this a little bit. Basically what we want to do is we want to have a input for the URL of the YouTube video, and then also a button to submit. And when you do that, I want to kick off that whole workflow for us in Convex. I'm going to say add a form with an input for a YouTube URL and a button to submit. When submitted, invoke a convex mutation to kick off the workflow. So the cool thing about convex is it comes with a cursor rule. So if you like using cursor, it has this entire MD that explains how convex kind of works, like the mutations, the actions, and whatnot. So I've seen it be very good at basically just generating the code for you without you having to do too much. So like, let's just apply this. Now we'll have a form with an input, and then down here for the task, submit your YouTube URL. I think we already have a mutation here, so it should have just used the title generation workflow. So we're not going to actually use that code that it gave us, because we can say workflow dot and then invoke that. Now, as far as calling the mutation, I just need to basically call use mutation that comes from TanStack React Query. I pass it a mutation function of use convex mutation, and I pass it that workflow mutation that we talked about. Okay, so now we should be able to call the mutate function here, and then also we'll have like an is pending to know if it's currently submitting. So I think I can just do this. And then we don't need to display that stuff. Let me go ahead and paste in the YouTube URL. And then I'm going to kick this off, and I want to make sure that we actually get some workflows that are generating. So let me delete these titles, go back to my workflows right here, and delete this. And I just want to make sure this works. So if I go ahead and just click on the submit button, we see the workflow get kicked off, and again, we'll get all the titles that'll pop up. So what I want to do is after you submit, I want to go ahead and show the titles, like maybe show a spinner saying we are generating your titles. And then I want to show the titles as they pop up in maybe like a grid or something. So I think we can kind of just ask AI to kind of add some of the stuff. Can you please improve the design of this page and make it all dark mode? Additionally, I want you to show a spinner as the workflow is executing, and then start showing the titles as they are being generated in the UI. Okay, I'm going to modify this so it returns the workflow ID. And then once we actually submit, we should get back a workflow ID over here. So now we want to add a query on Convex so that when we want to get all the titles back based on a workflow ID, we can do that. So I can say like get titles, that'll be a public query. And then it's going to take in a workflow ID. And I think we could just return all the titles based on a workflow ID. So I think I could say query the titles. Now something that we haven't done yet in Convex is you can actually add a schema where you can actually add types to your tables. Right now, like everything is kind of not typed. So let's go to our data, and then we want to look at the schema here. If you copy this schema file and just paste it in, we will have, I don't know why we even have tasks. I think I need to delete this table. Delete that tasks, and then yeah, delete the whole tasks file. We don't need that. So we only have titles, but the difference is I need to add in a workflow ID. So let's make sure that in the schema we have a workflow ID. That could be a string. And one thing that I haven't talked about in Convex is when you make these tables, you can actually attach indexes to them. So I can say index, and then we'll say by workflow ID, so that we can later look up all the titles by the workflow ID here. And then we'll go back. So then instead of doing a filter, I think we can actually just say with index, and then we're going to grab everything that matches that workflow ID and return that back. And this will have to take in a workflow ID to be able to even like kick it off now. So I think for the args here, this needs to take in a workflow ID like that. So wherever we're storing the titles, let's go back to the workflow. This needs to take in a workflow ID. Which I'm guessing we'll just have to pass in an args. So let's go up here and let's pass in a workflow ID here, which means we'll have to pass it in there, but we don't get the workflow ID until we run it. So I think I might actually have to generate some type of random ID here. So I'll just go ahead and say like title generation workflow ID. I'll just do a hacky math.random for right now, like whatever. So that we have some random ID we can pass, and then that's actually the ID that we want to send back to the UI. Let's make sure that we have that stuff. And then in the UI, we just need to make sure that we pass in the workflow ID at some point. All right, I'm going to try this one more time. I'm going to go back to the UI. I'm going to try to generate the title. I'm not sure what that is. But as it's kicking off the workflow, okay, so they're coming in. It looks, I think we can style this up and get rid of that big giant circle, whatever that was. A couple of tweaks I want to do. So in the UI, maybe we should stop vibe coding because it just generates some bad looking UIs. I think what I want to do is I want to make a new route. So in TanStack, you can actually make new routes. So for example, if I do a money sign and say workflow ID.tsx, what I can do is I can grab that workflow ID. I think it's called use params. And then I should be able to get it back. Let me do that. That'll get the workflow ID. Let me rename this a workflows. And then the workflow ID. And then we basically want to get the workflow. I'll do this. We'll get the workflow, use a suspense query, use a convex query to get back the workflow titles of that, which means we don't need this anymore. And then all this stuff we're going to grab. So we will return all this. And then we'll navigate to the other page when it's done. Pass in the workflow ID. Let's see if this works. Okay, a lot of stuff going on here, I know, but basically we have a page with a form. When you submit it, it's going to get that workflow ID and it's going to navigate us to another page, which will then show the workflow. So I think what I can do is now I can test this out by grabbing the workflow ID. And then I'm going to go ahead and just go here, workflows / that. And now I can see all the titles. So a couple things I want to do is I want to style this page. Please restyle this page to look nice and also display the ratings of the titles in a nice looking format. Have the highest ratings at the top, lowest at the bottom. Please use colors of green for high rated items and red or lower items. Center everything. Page. All right, I'm just gonna vibe code a little bit. I'm gonna go ahead and tell it to refactor this page, make it look nice. Also make it dark mode. Let's see if it can kind of improve this a little bit. Okay, so it still doesn't look good. I think the issue is that Tailwind is not installed here. Sorry, Tailwind wasn't set up correctly, so I went through and kind of fixed that. So basically now, we should see all these titles pop up, and we have them sorted to have the highest rating at the top. I want to make sure that a spinner is showing if the titles are not yet like rendered. So let's see if we have a spinner. Yeah, it looks like we should have a spinner here. So I'm gonna go here and just add a link, and then we're just gonna go to the home page, and I'll say like generate to or process YouTube video. I don't know what you call it, but I should be able to basically go back to the YouTube title generator here. I went ahead and just applied a little bit of styles to here to make this centered. I think some of the final things that we talked about is like we could have multiple reviewing agents. I'm not sure if it's better to just have one. We did the whole looping thing, which is great. I think it's generating more titles and giving a chance to improve titles based on existing outputs. I just want to add a little bit more agents. Like, would it be cool to add in some of these other type of agents, storytelling agent? Like, for example, I could just go ahead and grab all these. And we're going to go ahead and just see how far we can get by just adding in those agents directly into our convex. So I'm going to go ahead and say, please update this to add in the other missing agents. Again, please generate unique markdown for each agent based on the image I provided. Follow the existing code to implement the agent. And then I'll go ahead and just do that agent mode. So I should go through here and, you know, add in some more agents and stuff with different markdown. And then I'm also going to go to the workflow, and I want it to use, like, where's the Theo agent? I'm also going to say, after that, please modify the workflow to add those agents as steps to this line. So that'll hopefully give it a chance to just generate more titles, various types of titles, and we can kind of have them all be rewritten and reviewed at the end. All right, so it looks like it added in the data agent, question agent, how to agent, and listicle agent. And then it added in all those agents here. So hopefully they all follow a similar format. So we'll see how this goes. I'm gonna go ahead and accept these, and then we can go ahead and just try to kick off a workflow. I'm gonna go ahead and just do 5 titles per agent and see how this works out. So we're gonna go ahead and just make sure this is all deploying. It looks good. We can go back, and now we actually have a lot more agents that we can probably try out. So let's find one that we haven't done before. This is the software engineering mindset you need. So one of the things, let's see if it can generate a title that's better than what I had. Let's go ahead and click generate. And before I do that, I'm gonna clear out all my titles, start fresh. I'm gonna clear out my workflows and my steps. Just in case we want to debug, it's easier to just look for one. Okay, so let's try it out. I'm gonna go ahead and just generate the titles, and it should start cooking. All right, so it looks like one of the engagement reviewers failed because could not parse response content as the length limit was reached. But it looked like a bunch of others passed. So here's like the issue I was kind of talking about, where you have to make sure your code is written good. So there's a couple things we could potentially do. I think this one actually threw the exception. And so we could potentially catch exceptions and then just like return null. I'm trying to think, if this thing were to throw an exception, we could just have like an empty thing here, and then we could filter out the bad reviews. Or we could try to add logic to like not have it potentially fail out. It's saying that the content length was too long. I might just catch an error for right now and log it. And then what we could do is just return, this could potentially just return undefined. Okay, I think what we want to do is I'm going to wrap this whole thing and just say filter, make sure it's not equal to undefined. And I'll put the as over here, so I think this should hopefully be an array of actual review things. Okay, I'll do the same thing. This is, again, I'm just like hacking this together real quick. So I think I'm going to do the same thing over here, where after the promise all, again, we could filter and just get the ones that are actually defined. And I think that would hopefully fix her issue. I think having this be a type at the top might be a little bit better. So I'll say like review type, and I will just use that. And then I'll use that in place of this. And then also in place of this, so we don't have duplicate code everywhere. We want to keep this a little bit cleaner. Yeah, let's try this out. We ran into a little issue, but that's common. Let's go back and try it again. Let's go here, go ahead and kick off that one. We should see it hopefully start generating some titles. I'm going to watch the logs as it's kind of going through here and just see if it throws an exception early. You can see it kicking off the different agents. We got the storyteller, the listic, how to, data, question, Theo Agent. And now it's starting to review them all. Now they're starting to show up. We got some 6s at the bottom. Looks like it's reviewing some more. So I did log in to make sure I'm not spending too much money. Looks like I'm at 19 cents so far, which isn't too bad. So this will keep on hopefully going through. Looks like it's generating more titles. We should have a bunch now. While it's generating these, I might actually go and just like improve this page a little bit. I want to put this in a grid. So instead of it being a bunch of like things here, I'm going to say grid calls 3. Oh, I should probably put it, where should I put it? Where's the map? Let me put it there. Okay. You can't take it from an 8 to a 9, unfortunately, so that might just require a lot of extra tweaking from us to get that working. Now, one thing I think I want to do, so it's like a better demo, is instead of storing it after the promise all, I want to actually store these as they're being generated. So I think there's a store titles that we're running here, which loops through all the reviews and stores them. Instead, we could move this logic to the actual reviewer. So I could go here, and this is an action. So technically, I could just at the very end, I should get the response here. So I could say const parsed is equal to this, and if it is parsed, I could run. I think I could actually just do a context dot run mutation. And then I can pass it that information over here. So at some point, I think I can say like title is parsed, original title, and rating is that. But we will need the workflow ID now, so I should pass that in. And then the title, store titles, pass in an array. Okay. So again, I can use this approach so that after it reviews every single title, it automatically pushes into the array. And so we'll get like feedback faster in the UI, because right now it's waiting for everything to finish, and that's not what we want. So let's go make sure we pass in the workflow ID. Yeah, so we'll pass in the workflow ID there. And then wherever we're doing store titles, like we don't need to do it there anymore. Instead, we can do it in the reviewer. All right, let's try this again. I'm gonna go ahead and just get the same thing. I'm gonna go back to video processing. I'm gonna kick it off. And hopefully now we should get some nice feedback as these titles are basically finishing. Okay. And so now you can see they actually like show up as they're finishing behind the scenes with when OpenAI like returns the responses and whatnot. I don't really like the fade in effect too much. I might get rid of that. It's kind of weird. I think this is as far as I'm going to take it. So I hope you guys learned a little bit about how to use Convex to build out these powerful agent systems that need to take in, inputs and take in prompts, and they can pass the results of one to the other. You can easily just kind of attach stuff together and promise await them all. You can do conditional logic and while loops inside a workflow. And it just makes building complex things like this, where you have agents depending on agents, much easier than if you were to do it by hand, in my opinion. And the cool thing is that all of these different things are basically being kicked off concurrently inside of the Convex compute. And so you don't have to worry about doing the parallel processing yourself or the retries. It's all built into that workflow component. And the database updates, like I showed you, this is all real time. As stuff is finishing, it's getting updated in the UI. So it's pretty cool. Definitely go check out Convex. I recommend it. I've used it for many different side projects. It makes building out reactive UIs so simple. Definitely go check out convex.dev for more information, and also join their Discord if you want to talk to them or their team and ask them questions. They have a very vibrant Discord community. They're very helpful. They also got a really cool thing on their dashboard where you can go through and actually play around with Convex by using their interactive demo. So go check that out, see if you like it. But as you saw in this video, I was able to build something pretty complex with very, very little work from a back-end perspective. If you made it this far, I also have a Discord channel of my own that you can join if you want to find a place to kind of hang out and talk to other developers. Like always, have a good day and happy coding.